The desert moon of Kareth 7 was a place where nothing good ever happened. The sand was red like dried blood, and the air smelled like metal and sulfur. Two suns hung in the sky, casting double shadows on everything below. It was the kind of place where soldiers went to die, and Sergeant Kyle Bennett had been walking through it for 3 hours. Kyle was a tall man with broad shoulders, and a face that had seen too many battles. He was 34 years old, born in a small town in Montana where the winters were cold and the people were tough. He had joined the military at 18, right after high school, because he wanted to see the stars. Now, 12 years later, he had seen more stars than he ever wanted to, and most of them looked the same from the ground. Behind him walked his squad. Private First Class Danny Ortiz was the youngest, barely 22, with a baby face that made him look even younger. Corporal Lisa Wong was small but fierce, the best shot in the unit. Specialist Travis Cole was quiet and serious, the kind of man who never smiled but always had your back when things went bad. They were a reconnaissance unit, which meant they were supposed to look around and report what they saw. They were not supposed to fight. They were not supposed to get into trouble. But trouble had a way of finding soldiers on Kareth 7. No matter how careful they were. Kyle held up his fist, and everyone stopped. He looked at the canyon walls rising on both sides of them. The rocks were the same red color as the sand, full of holes and shadows. Perfect places for an enemy to hide. "I don't like this," he said quietly. "Me neither, Sarge," Lisa replied. She had her rifle up, scanning the rocks above them. "Too quiet." Danny shifted nervously, his boots scraping against the ground. "Maybe we should go back. Report what we've seen so far." "We haven't seen anything yet," Trana said. "That's the problem." Kyle thought about it. They were 3 kilometers from the abandoned mining settlement they had been sent to investigate. Command wanted to know if the Velthari were using it as a base. The Velthari were aliens, tall and gray-skinned with scales like lizards and faces like nightmares. They had been at war with humanity for 5 years, and they showed no signs of stopping. "We keep moving," Kyle decided. "Stay sharp." They walked another 100 meters before Elisa spoke again. "Sergeant, I'm picking up movement at 2 o'clock. Up in the rocks." Kyle turned to look, but he never got the chance to see what she was pointing at. The canyon walls exploded with light and noise. Plasma fire rained down on them from every direction. The Velthari had been waiting, hidden in the rocks like snakes, and now they were everywhere. Kyle counted at least 40 of them, maybe more, their gray bodies blending with the stone around them. "Take cover," Kyle shouted, but it was already too late for Danny. A bolt of green plasma hit the young private in the chest. Danny looked down at the smoking hole in his body with a confused expression, like he couldn't understand what had happened. Then he fell backward and didn't move again. Kyle felt rage burn through him, hot and bright. He raised his rifle and started firing. The weapon in his hands was standard military issue, but Kyle was not standard. 2 years ago, he had volunteered for a program called Project Lazarus. The scientists had filled his body with tiny machines called nanites. They had replaced some of his bones with metal. They had added backup organs made of synthetic materials. They had made him faster, stronger, and harder to kill, but not impossible to kill. Not by a long shot. He dropped 3 Velthari soldiers before they realized he was different from the others. Then they all started shooting at him. The first plasma bolt hit his shoulder and spun him around. The second went through his stomach, and he felt his insides catch fire. The third and fourth hit his legs, and he fell to the ground. "Sarge!" Lisa screamed. "Go!" Kyle yelled back. He was still firing, still trying to give them time to escape. "Get out of here." "That's an order." He saw Lisa grab Travis and pull him behind a large boulder. He saw them start running toward the far end of the canyon. Good. At least they might make it. Kyle kept shooting until his rifle ran out of power. Then he lay there in the red sand, looking up at the two suns, feeling his body try to repair itself and fail. The damage was too much. Even the nanites couldn't fix this fast enough. A shadow fell over him. Kyle looked up and saw a Veltri soldier standing there. This one was different from the others. He was taller, with ritual scars cut into his snout and metal decorations hanging from his neck. A leader of some kind. The Veltri spoke in his clicking, hissing language. Kyle's translator, a small device implanted behind his ear, turned the words into English. The enhanced one. Command will want confirmation of the kill. The leader drew a pistol and pointed it at Kyle's chest. Any last words, human? Kyle wanted to say something brave, something that would make the enemy remember him. But his mouth was full of blood, and his vision was going dark. So he just stared up at the alien and waited for the end. The pistol fired 3 times. Each shot burned through Kyle's chest like a hot knife through paper. He felt his heart stop. He felt his lungs collapse. He felt everything start to shut down. But even as darkness took him, some small part of Kyle's brain noticed that the nanites were still working. Slowly, stubbornly, impossibly, they were still trying to fix him. The Veltri leader put his pistol away. "Burn the body," he ordered his soldiers. "Then bury what's left. I want no trace of this human remaining." The soldiers obeyed. They poured fuel on Kyle's body and set it on fire. The flames burned hot and bright for 20 minutes, turning flesh and cloth to ash. When the fire died down, they shoveled dirt and rocks over what remained until there was a mound 2 meters deep. The leader planted a flag on top of the mound. It was a Veltri death flag, a symbol that meant the enemy below was destroyed completely, with no chance of coming back. Then the Veltri soldiers marched away to prepare for their next attack, leaving the desert quiet and still. They did not know that deep beneath the soil, in the darkness and the silence, something was still alive. Something was still fighting. Something was refusing to die. And in 3 days, that something would dig itself out of its own grave and show the Veltri what humanity was really made of. For 3 days, there was only darkness. Kyle Bennett was dead. His heart had stopped beating. His brain had stopped thinking. His blood had stopped flowing through his veins. By every definition that doctors and scientists used, he was no longer alive. But the nanites inside him did not care about definitions. They were tiny machines, smaller than grains of sand, and there were billions of them swimming through what remained of Kyle's body. They had been designed by the smartest engineers on Earth for one simple purpose: keep the host alive at any cost. And even now, buried under 2 meters of alien soil, they were still trying to do their job. The nanites started with the brain. The brain was the most important part, because without it, there would be no Kyle Bennett to save. There would just be a body, empty and useless. So the nanites swarmed through the burned and damaged tissue, rebuilding connections that had been destroyed, fixing pathways that had been broken. It was slow work. The brain is the most complex thing in the universe, and putting one back together is not easy. But the nanites were patient, and they had help. Before Kyle had been buried, the scientists had put a special device at the base of his skull. It was called a quantum backup, and it held a copy of everything that made Kyle who he was. His memories, his personality, his hopes and dreams and fears. The nanites used this backup like a blueprint, rebuilding Kyle's mind one tiny piece at a time. On the first day, his brain started working again. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Thoughts began to form in the darkness. They were confused thoughts, broken and strange, like trying to remember a dream after waking up. Kyle remembered his mother. She had died when he was 15, taken by a sickness that came too fast for the doctors to stop. He remembered the smell of her hair, like flowers and sunshine. He remembered how she used to sing to him when he couldn't sleep. Kyle remembered his father. A hard man, quiet and strong, who had taught him how to hunt and fish and survive in the wilderness. His father had never said, "I love you," out loud, but Kyle had always known it was true. Kyle remembered his daughter, Emma. She was 12 years old now, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. He had promised to call her on her birthday. When was her birthday? He couldn't remember. The thought made him sad in a distant, foggy way. On the second day, the nanites moved on to the rest of the body. The heart came first. Kyle's original heart had been destroyed by the plasma bolts, but that was okay. The nanites built him a new one, using materials they found in the soil around them. It was a hybrid heart, part organic and part synthetic. Stronger than the original dot. Then came the lungs, then the liver, then the kidneys. Each organ was rebuilt piece by piece, molecule by molecule. The nanites worked without rest, without pause, consuming the dirt and rocks around them and turning it into flesh and bone and blood. Kyle's eyes regenerated. He could not open them yet, but he knew they were there. His ears rebuilt themselves, and suddenly he could hear again. He heard the wind blowing above the surface. He heard alien birds calling in the distance. He heard the settling of soil around his body, pressing against him like a heavy blanket. He also heard voices. The Valkyrie had made camp nearby. Kyle could hear them talking. Their clicking language filtered through the translator that was somehow still working in his rebuilt skull. They were discussing their plans, their strategies, their upcoming attack on the human base. Kyle listened and remembered. His brain recorded everything, storing the information for later. He did not know how it would be useful, but some instinct told him it would matter. On the third day, Kyle's muscles began to connect to his nervous system. Feeling returned to his body in waves of terrible pain. It was the worst pain he had ever felt. Worse than being shot, worse than being burned. Every nerve was screaming as it came back to life, sending signals of damage and trauma that made Kyle want to scream himself. But he could not scream. His throat was not ready yet, and there was dirt in his mouth. So he endured the pain in silence, just as he had endured everything else in his life. The nanites helped. They released chemicals into his blood that dulled the pain, keeping it bearable. Not comfortable, but bearable. Kyle had learned a long time ago that comfort was a luxury soldiers rarely got. On the fourth day, buried 2 meters beneath the surface of an alien moon, Kyle Bennett opened his eyes. There was nothing to see. The darkness was complete, absolute. The kind of darkness that made you wonder if you had really opened your eyes at all. But Kyle's eyes were not normal eyes anymore. The nanites had improved them, adding the ability to see heat and detect movement, even in total blackness. He looked up and saw the soil above him, cold and dense and heavy. He looked around and saw the outline of his own grave, the walls of dirt pressing in on every side. He was trapped in a coffin of earth, and the only way out was up. Kyle moved his fingers. They were not fully formed yet, the skin still growing over exposed synthetic muscle, but they worked. He curled them into fists, testing his strength. Then he started to dig dot. It was hard work, harder than anything he had ever done. The soil was packed tight, and his hands were weak. Every time he clawed at the dirt above him, his fingers tore and bled. But the nanites repaired the damage almost as fast as he caused it, so he kept going. Hour after hour, Kyle dug. He did not think about what he was doing. He did not think about how impossible it should be. He just focused on the next handful of dirt, the next inch of progress, the next breath of stale air. He thought about Emma. She needed her father. He could not give up. He thought about Danny, killed in the ambush. Danny deserved justice. He could not give up. He thought about Lisa and Travis, hopefully safe back at the base. They needed to know what he had heard. He could not give up. After 16 hours of digging, Kyle's hand broke through the surface. He felt cold wind on his torn fingers, and it was the most beautiful feeling in the world. He grabbed at the edge of the hole and pulled himself up. Dirt falling away from his body like water. Kyle Bennett crawled out of his own grave and lay on the red sand, gasping for breath. His body was still incomplete. Patches of synthetic muscle showed through gaps in his skin. One eye was still a hollow socket, not yet finished. He was naked and covered in dirt and blood, and he probably looked like a monster from a horror movie. But he was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the Valkyrie had done to him. He was alive. Slowly, painfully, Kyle stood up. His legs shook but held. He looked around at the empty desert, at the two suns rising over the horizon, at the Valkyrie camp visible in the distance. He had a long walk ahead of him. But Kyle Bennett had never been afraid of hard work. He took his first step and then his second, and then he was walking. Walking toward the human base. Walking toward his squad. Walking toward a future that the enemy had tried to steal from him. The Valkyrie had shot him, burned him, and buried him. And now he was going to make them regret it. Lieutenant Commander Sandra Reyes had not slept in 4 days. She stood in the command center of Forward Operating Base Epsilon, staring at the screens and maps that covered the walls. The base was a collection of metal buildings surrounded by fences and guard towers, home to 150 human soldiers. It was their only foothold on Kareth 7, and the Valkyrie wanted to destroy it. Sandra was 41 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and tired lines around her eyes. She had been a soldier for 20 years, and she had never felt more exhausted than she did right now. The weight of command pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. 4 days ago, she had sent a reconnaissance squad into the Canyonlands. 4 soldiers, led by Sergeant Kyle Bennett. They were supposed to be a quick trip, in and out, no trouble. Instead, they had walked into an ambush. 2 soldiers were confirmed dead. Danny Ortiz, shot in the first seconds of the attack. Kyle Bennett, shot and burned and buried by the enemy. Lisa Vang and Travis Cole were missing, probably dead as well. Sandra had sent search parties, but they had found nothing except the Valkyrie death flag marking Kyle's grave. Now the Valkyrie were massing for a major attack. Sandra's scouts reported hundreds of enemy soldiers gathering in the canyons to the east. They would hit the base soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. And Sandra did not have enough troops to stop them. Reinforcements were 2 weeks away. She wasn't sure they had 2 days. "Commander," said Technical Specialist Greg Patterson from his station. He was a young man with glasses and nervous hands, better with computers than with guns. "We've got something on the perimeter sensors." Sandra turned to look at him. "Valkyrie?" "No, ma'am. The sensors say it's human. Single contact, approaching from the east." Greg frowned at his screen. "But the readings are strange. Body temperature is too low. Structural density is wrong. It's like the sensors don't know what they're looking at." Sandra felt something cold crawl down her spine. "Put it on the main screen." The large display on the wall flickered and changed. It showed a view of the desert outside the base, red sand stretching to the horizon. And walking across that sand was a figure. It was the shape of a man, but it did not look like a man. It walked slowly, unsteadily, like someone who had been sick for a long time. Parts of its body seemed wrong, incomplete somehow. And as the camera zoomed in closer, Sandra saw the face. Half of it was normal skin. The other half was exposed muscle and metal, the inner workings of something that should not be walking, should not be moving, should not be alive. "Oh my God," Greg whispered. Sandra recognized that face. Even damaged, even incomplete, she knew those features. She had looked at his service photo just yesterday, when she wrote the report declaring him killed in action. "That's Kyle Bennett," she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, like someone else was speaking. "That's Sergeant Bennett. She ran. She didn't remember deciding to run, didn't remember leaving the command center, but suddenly she was outside, sprinting toward the perimeter fence. Other soldiers followed her, their weapons raised, their faces full of fear and confusion. The figure stopped 10 meters from the fence. Up close, he looked even worse. His left eye was a dark hole. His right arm was fully formed, but his left was still rebuilding itself. Synthetic bones visible through patches of growing skin. He was naked, covered in dirt and dried blood, and he swayed slightly as if a strong wind might knock him down. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. It buzzed and crackled, not quite right, but the words were clear. Lieutenant Commander Reyes, Sergeant Kyle Bennett reporting for duty. I have intelligence on enemy positions and force strength. For a long moment, nobody said anything. The soldiers stared at the thing that had been Kyle Bennett, their weapons half raised, their minds struggling to understand what they were seeing. Sandra found her voice first. Sergeant, you were declared killed in action 4 days ago. Yes, ma'am. Something like a smile crossed Kyle's damaged face. The Valkyrie shot me, burned me, and buried me. It didn't take. He took a step forward, and his legs gave out. Sandra moved without thinking, catching him before he hit the ground. He was lighter than he should have been, his body not yet complete, but she could feel the heat of life in him. Whatever he was real. He was here. Get him to medical, Sandra ordered. Now, they carried him through the base, soldiers stopping to stare as they passed. Word spread fast. The dead man was back. The sergeant had returned from his grave. By the time they reached the medical building, half the base knew something impossible had happened. Dr. Catherine Murphy was waiting for them. She was a small woman with short gray hair and calm eyes that had seen every kind of injury a war could produce. But even she looked shaken as they laid Kyle on the examination table. This shouldn't be possible, she said, running a scanner over his body. His organs are rebuilding themselves. His skin is regenerating in real time. The nanites are consuming raw materials and converting them into tissue. She shook her head. Project Lazarus was theoretical. We never thought it would actually work. Well, it works, Kyle said. His voice was getting stronger, his vocal cords repairing themselves as they watched. Trust me, I'm as surprised as you are. The door burst open and Lisa Wong ran in. She was still in her combat gear, dirt and blood on her face. And when she saw Kyle lying on the table, she made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. Sarge, she said. Oh God, Sarge, you're alive. She threw herself at him, hugging him hard. Kyle grunted as his still-forming ribs cracked under the pressure, but he hugged her back. Easy there, he said. I'm still putting myself back together. Lisa pulled away, tears streaming down her face. We saw them burn you. We saw them bury you. We thought you were gone. I know. Kyle reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek. But I'm back now, and I'm not going anywhere. Travis Cole appeared in the doorway. He looked at Kyle for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he nodded once, slowly. Good to see you, Sarge, he said. Good to be seen. Sandra stepped forward. Sergeant, you said you had intelligence. I need to know everything. Kyle sat up on the table. His body was already looking better, skin growing over exposed areas, his left eye beginning to form in its socket. The nanites were working overtime now, fueled by the nutrients Dr. Murphy had pumped into him. The Valkyrie made camp near my grave for 2 days, he said. They thought I was dead, so they talked freely. I heard everything. He tapped his temple. It's all recorded up here. 800 soldiers, 4 heavy plasma batteries, 12 troop transports, 2 command vehicles. They're planning to hit this base in less than 18 hours. Sandra felt her stomach drop. 800 against 150. Those were impossible odds. There's more, Kyle continued. I know their attack route. I know their timing. I know where their commanders will be. He looked Sandra in the eye, and there was something fierce burning there, something that had survived death itself. Give me a chance, Commander. Let me show you what humanity is capable of. Sandra looked at this man who had been shot, burned, and buried. This man who had clawed his way out of his own grave. This man who was sitting here, still rebuilding himself, asking for permission to fight again. She made her decision. Tell me everything, she said, and then we'll make a plan. 12 hours had passed, and Kyle Bennett was almost whole again. He sat on the edge of the medical bed, looking down at his hands. Both of them were complete now, skin covering the synthetic muscles beneath. His left eye had finished forming, and when he blinked, both eyes worked together perfectly. The nanites had done their job well. Dr. Murphy stood nearby, watching her scanner with amazement that had not faded since Kyle arrived. Your regeneration rate is incredible, she said. You're at about 85% now. In another 6 hours, you'll be fully restored. I don't have 6 hours, Kyle replied. The Valkyrie attack in less than 18. We need to move before then. Sergeant, your body isn't ready for combat. You're missing muscle mass. Your nervous system isn't fully calibrated, and your energy reserves are dangerously low. Dr. Murphy shook her head. If you push yourself too hard, you could collapse at the worst possible moment. Then I'll collapse after the fight is over. Kyle stood up, testing his legs. They felt solid now, strong enough to carry him. I didn't crawl out of a grave to sit in a hospital bed, Doctor. Before she could argue, the door opened and Lieutenant Commander Reyes walked in. Behind her came Lisa and Travis, along with several other officers Kyle didn't recognize. Their faces were serious, focused. This was a war council. How are you feeling, Sergeant? Sandra asked. Ready to work, Commander. Good, because we need that intelligence you promised. Sandra activated a holographic projector on the table beside the bed. A three-dimensional map of the surrounding area appeared, showing the base, the canyon systems, and the desert beyond. Show us what you know. Kyle walked to the projector and began to manipulate the image, his neural interface connecting to the system automatically. The map zoomed in on the eastern canyons, revealing details that had not been there before. The main Valkyrie force is here, Kyle said, highlighting a large area. Approximately 800 soldiers, organized into 4 battalions. They're using the canyon walls for cover, staying hidden from our aerial surveillance. He added more markers to the map. 4 heavy plasma batteries, positioned at these points. They'll provide covering fire during the assault. 12 troop transports here, ready to carry soldiers to our walls. And 2 command vehicles at the center of the formation. Sandra studied the map with narrowed eyes. Those command vehicles are the key. Valkyrie military doctrine relies heavily on centralized leadership. If we can take out the commanders, the rest of the army will fall into chaos. Exactly what I was thinking, Kyle said. Their leader is a war master named Kethis. He was the one who ordered my execution. If he dies, the attack falls apart. But getting to him is the problem, said one of the other officers, a captain named Robert Quinn with a scarred face and suspicious eyes. Those command vehicles are in the middle of 800 enemy soldiers. How do you suggest we reach them? Kyle smiled. It was a cold smile, the kind that made people uncomfortable. I go in alone. The room went silent. Everyone stared at Kyle like he had just announced he was going to fly to the moon by flapping his arms. That's suicide, Captain Quinn said flatly. No, Kyle replied. Suicide implies I would die. And as you can see, I'm not very good at dying. He turned back to the map. I know their patrol routes. I know where they station their guards. I know the blind spots in their formation. I can slip through their lines, reach the command vehicles, and destroy them before they even know I'm there." "And if they catch you?" Lisa asked. Her voice was quiet, worried. "Then they kill me again." Kyle shrugged. "We already know that doesn't work." Sandra was silent for a long moment, considering. She looked at the map, at Kyle, at the faces of her officers. Finally, she spoke. "Even if you succeed in destroying the command vehicles, we still face a force that outnumbers us 5-1. Taking out their leadership helps, but it doesn't win the battle." "No, but it gives us a chance," Kyle said. "Right now, we have no chance. The Valkyrie will hit us with overwhelming force, coordinated attacks from multiple directions, heavy weapon support. We'll be crushed in hours." He pointed to the command vehicles on the map. "Without their War Master, they lose coordination. Their battalions will act independently, making mistakes, getting in each other's way. Their heavy weapons will have no guidance. Instead of a professional army, we'll be facing a mob." "A mob of 800, Quinn pointed out. "A mob we can beat." Kyle looked around the room. "I've seen what human soldiers can do. I've seen them hold impossible positions, win impossible fights, survive impossible odds. Give me the chaos I'm offering, and I promise you, this base will still be standing when the suns come up." Sandra made her decision. "Do it. You leave in 4 hours." 2 hours, Kyle said. "I want to be in position before their scouts start their night patrols." 2 hours then. Sandra turned to her officers. "Quinn, I want every soldier armed and in position before midnight. Lisa, Travis, you're coordinating the defense of the main gate. Dr. Murphy, do whatever you can to get Sergeant Bennett ready." The officers filed out, each with their own tasks to complete. Soon only Kyle, Lisa, and Travis remained in the medical bay. Lisa walked over it to Kyle and punched him in the arm. Not hard, but hard enough to hurt. "Ow," Kyle said. "What was that for?" "For dying on us." She punched him again. "And that's for planning to do something stupid like infiltrating an enemy army alone. It's not stupid if it works. It's still stupid." But Lisa was smiling now. The worry in her eyes mixed with something like pride. "Just promise me you'll come back. I promise." Travis stepped forward. He was holding something in his hands, a small metal object that Kyle recognized. It was Danny's dog tags, the identification discs that every soldier wore around their neck. "We brought him home," Travis said quietly. "We carried his body all the way back to base. He's going to be buried properly, with full honors." Kyle took the dog tags and held them tight. Danny Ortiz, 22 years old. He should have had a whole life ahead of him. "Thank you," Kyle said. "He looked up to you, Sarge. He used to say that if he could be half the soldier you were, he'd be happy." Travis met Kyle's eyes. "Make them pay for what they did to him." "I will." Kyle put the dog tags around his own neck, feeling the cold metal against his chest. He would carry Danny with him into battle. He would carry the memory of a young soldier who died too soon, whose only crime was being human in a galaxy that wanted humanity dead. 2 hours later, Kyle stood at the edge of the base, dressed in black combat gear, with weapons strapped to his body and explosive charges in his pack. The twin suns had set, and the desert was dark, except for the stars above. Sandra came to see him off. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "No," Kyle admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway. Why? After everything they did to you, why risk yourself again?" Kyle thought about the question. He thought about Danny and Lisa and Travis. He thought about Emma, his daughter, waiting for him back on Earth. He thought about all the soldiers in the base behind him, counting on him to give them a chance. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "And I'm the only one who can." He turned and walked into the darkness, leaving the safety of the base behind. Ahead of him, somewhere in those canyons, 800 Valkyrie soldiers waited for the morning attack. They had no idea that death was coming for them in the form of one human man who refused to stay dead. Kyle Bennett moved silently through the night, and the only thought in his mind was a promise. A promise to make the enemy pay. A promise to protect his people. A promise to show the universe what humanity was capable of. The Valkyrie had made a mistake when they buried him. They had given him something to fight for Dawn. Now he was going to make them regret it. The attack came 3 hours before dawn. Kyle had been moving through the Valkyrie encampment for over an hour, silent as a shadow. His body, now nearly 90% regenerated, worked perfectly in the darkness. His enhanced eyes saw everything, from the heat signatures of sleeping soldiers to the faint glow of patrol guards walking their routes. His synthetic muscles moved without sound, carrying him past enemies who never knew he was there. The Valkyrie had built their camp in a wide valley surrounded by canyon walls. Hundreds of tents spread across the rocky ground, each one holding soldiers who would soon march against a human base. At the center of the camp stood the 2 command vehicles, large metal transports with communications equipment on top and armed guards all around. Kyle counted 20 soldiers guarding the vehicles. Elite warriors, each one chosen by War Master Kethis himself. They stood at attention, their plasma rifles ready, their eyes scanning the darkness for threats. They never saw Kyle coming. He struck from the shadows like a nightmare given form. The first guard died before he could even turn around, Kyle's hand closing around his throat and crushing it with synthetic strength. The second guard managed to raise his rifle, but Kyle was faster, knocking the weapon aside and driving his fist through the alien's chest. 2 down. 18 to go. The other guards reacted quickly, their training taking over. They spread out, creating distance, trying to surround the attacker they still couldn't quite see. But Kyle was already moving, already killing, his body a weapon more deadly than anything they had ever faced. A plasma bulb burned past his head. Kyle grabbed the shooter and threw him into 2 of his companions, all 3 of them crashing to the ground. Before they could recover, Kyle was on them, his hands finding vulnerable points. His strength ending lives. Another guard charged him with a blade. Kyle caught the weapon on his forearm, the edge cutting deep into synthetic muscle. He ignored the pain and pulled the guard close, snapping his neck with a quick twist. The fight lasted 43 seconds. When it was over, 20 Valkyrie soldiers lay dead on the ground, and Kyle stood among them, breathing hard but unbroken. His wounds were already healing, the nanites repairing the damage, even as more enemies emerged from the nearby tents. Kyle didn't have time for them. He pulled the explosive charges from his pack and ran toward the first command vehicle. The door was locked. The locks meant nothing to a man who could punch through metal. He tore the door off its hinges and stepped inside. War Master Kethis stood at the center of the vehicle, staring at the screens that showed his guards dying. He was tall, even for a Valkyrie, with ritual scars covering his face and gold decorations marking his rank. When he saw Kyle, his eyes went wide with something that might have been fear. "You," the War Master said. His translator turned the clicking words into flat English. "You are the one we killed. We burned you. We buried you." "Yeah," Kyle said. "I get that a lot." He moved toward the reactor core at the back of the vehicle, placing the explosive charges. The timer showed 30 seconds. Plenty of time to finish this conversation. Kethis drew a combat blade, a weapon as long as Kyle's arm, and attacked. He was fast, faster than any of his soldiers, his blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. Kyle blocked the first strike with his forearm, feeling the edge bite deep. He blocked the second strike with his other arm. Blood ran down his skin, but he didn't care. "Your kind will never stop us," Kethis hissed. "We will burn your worlds. We will enslave your children. We will erase your species from existence." Kyle looked at the War Master, at this alien who had ordered his death, who had watched him burn, who had buried him in foreign soil. He felt anger, yes, but something else too. Something like pity. "You don't understand us at all, do you?" Kyle said. "You think you can destroy humanity by killing us. But that's not how we work. We're not like you. We don't stop. We don't give up. You can shoot us, burn us, bury us, and we'll still crawl out of the ground and come back for more." He grabbed Kethis by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "That's what makes us human. We endure." The timer showed 10 seconds. Kyle threw the War Master across the vehicle and ran for the door. Behind him, Kethis scrambled to reach the explosive charges, trying to disarm them. He was too slow. Kyle leaped out of the vehicle just as the reactor exploded. The blast caught the second command vehicle as well, both of them disappearing in a ball of fire that lit up the night sky. The shockwave knocked Kyle to the ground, but he rolled with it and came up running. All around him, the Veltari camp descended into chaos. Soldiers ran in every direction, shouting orders that no one followed. Without their War Master, without their command structure, they didn't know what to do. Some tried to form defensive positions. Others ran toward the sound of the explosion. Many just stood frozen, waiting for orders that would never come. Kyle ran through the confusion, heading back toward the human base. He had done what he came to do. The rest was up to Sandra and her soldiers. He didn't have to wait long. The counterattack came like a hammer blow. Sandra Reyes led the charge personally, her soldiers pouring out of the base in a wave of fury. They hit the disorganized Veltari army from 3 directions at once, cutting through scattered groups, overwhelming isolated positions. Without leadership, the Veltari couldn't coordinate. Their heavy plasma batteries sat silent, operators unsure where to aim. Their transports couldn't organize a retreat. Their soldiers fought bravely, but bravery without strategy was just dying with honor. The battle lasted until dawn. When the suns rose over Karath 7, the Veltari army was broken. Bodies littered the canyons, gray and still. Prisoners sat in groups, their weapons taken, their spirits crushed. 80% of the enemy force was dead or captured. The human base still stood. Kyle found Lisa and Travis near the main gate, both of them exhausted and wounded but alive. Lisa had a bandage on her arm and a smile on her face. Travis had a new scar across his forehead that would probably never fade. "You did it, Sarge," Lisa said. "You actually did it." "We did it," Kyle corrected. "All of us." Sandra approached them, her uniform torn and dirty, blood on her hands that wasn't her own. She looked at Kyle for a long moment, and then she did something unexpected. She saluted. "Sergeant Kyle Bennett," she said formally. "On behalf of the Terran Frontier Defense Force, I am officially recommending you for the Medal of Valor. What you did tonight will be remembered for generations." Kyle didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to praise. He was just a soldier doing his job. "Thank you, Commander," he managed. Sandra lowered her salute and smiled. "Now, go call your daughter. You promised her a birthday call, and you're already late." Kyle blinked. "How did you know about that?" "You talk in your sleep. Or at least you did, while Dr. Murphy was putting you back together." Sandra put a hand on his shoulder. "Go, Sergeant. The war will still be here when you get back." Kyle walked to the communications center and sat down at a terminal. He entered the codes for Earth, for New Denver, for the house where his ex-wife Patricia lived with their daughter Emma. The screen flickered, and then a young face appeared, eyes wide with surprise. "Dad?" Emma said. "Is that really you?" "Hey, sweetheart." Kyle felt tears forming in his eyes, and he didn't try to stop them. "Happy birthday. I'm sorry I'm late. They said you were dead. Mom said you were gone forever." "I know, but I'm not." Kyle smiled at his daughter, at this beautiful girl who had grown so much since he last saw her. I'm right here, and I'm coming home." Emma started to cry then, happy tears mixed with relief and joy. Kyle listened to her voice, watched her face, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or purpose. He had been shot, burned, and buried. He had clawed his way out of a grave on an alien moon. He had infiltrated an enemy army and destroyed their command structure. He had helped win an impossible battle. But this moment, right here, talking to his daughter, this was what made it all worthwhile. Humanity would endure. They would face whatever the galaxy threw at them, and they would survive. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they refused to quit. Because they carried their loved ones in their hearts. Because they always found a reason to keep fighting. Kyle Bennett was living proof of that, and somewhere in the stars, other species were starting to learn what humanity was really made of. They were learning to fear the creatures who could be shot, burned, and buried, and still wake up, repair themselves, and report for duty, because that was what humans did, and they would never stop.